Have you ever been pushed so far that you stopped caring about the consequences? Emily Jenkins, a struggling waitress with $3 in her bank account, stared into the eyes of Richard Sterling, a man worth billions, and delivered a threat that silenced the entire room. "Shout at me again," she whispered, "and I'll end you." Everyone thought she was crazy. They thought she was just another fired employee. But they didn't know who she really was, or the secret she held that could bring Richard's empire crumbling down in a single afternoon. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's a warning. What happened next changed everything. The lunch rush at the Silver Spoon in downtown Seattle was not for the faint of heart. It was a place where the city's elite mingled with tourists, where a Cobb salad cost $25, and where the coffee was expected to be poured before the cup was even empty. Emily Jenkins wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, careful not to smudge the makeup she had applied in the rearview mirror of her 2012 Honda Civic that morning. Her feet were throbbing. She was 6 hours into a double shift, and the rent for her small apartment in Fremont was 3 days late. Her landlord, Mr. Kowalski, had already left 2 voicemails that morning. Table 4 needs a refill, and Table 7 is asking where their calamari is, Gary, the floor manager, hissed as he walked past her. Gary was a man who sweated profusely, even when standing still, and believed that yelling was a form of effective leadership. "On it, Gary," Emily said, her voice tight. She grabbed the fresh pot of coffee and turned toward Table 4. That was when the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted. The heavy oak doors at the front swung open, and the ambient noise of clinking silverware and low chatter seemed to be sucked out of the room. Walking in was a man who looked like he owned the oxygen everyone else was breathing. He wore a navy bespoke suit that fit him with military precision. His silver hair was slicked back, and he wore sunglasses despite the overcast Seattle sky. Flanking him were 2 younger men in grey suits, clutching tablets and phones like lifelines. It was Richard Sterling. Emily froze for a split second. Everyone in Seattle knew Richard Sterling. He was the CIO of Sterling Hale Properties, the man currently buying up half the waterfront to build luxury condos that nobody in the neighborhood could afford. He was known in the papers as a visionary, and in the service industry as a nightmare. "Get me the corner booth," Richard barked at the hostess, a 19-year-old college student named Jenny who looked like she might faint. "And move whoever is sitting there." "So, sir, that table is reserved for the mayors. Did I ask who it was for?" Richard lowered his sunglasses, revealing ice-blue eyes that held zero warmth. "Move them. Now." Jenny scrambled. Within minutes, an elderly couple was awkwardly reshuffled to a smaller table near the kitchen, and Richard Sterling sat in the corner booth like a king on a throne. Emily's stomach dropped. That was her section. "Emily, take the VIP," Gary whispered, shoving her slightly. "Don't mess this up. He tips big if you don't speak, and he gets you fired if you breathe wrong." Emily took a deep breath, fixed her apron, and walked over. She approached the table with her notepad ready. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Emily, and I'll be taking care of—" "Sparkling water. Pellegrino. Not the domestic trash," Richard said, not looking up from his phone. "And a steak frites. Medium rare. If it's medium, I send it back. If it's rare, I send it back. Do you understand the concept of medium rare, or do I need to draw a diagram?" One of the associates snickered. Emily tightened her grip on the pen. "I understand perfectly, sir. And for the others? They'll have the same. And bring the water now. I'm parched." He waved his hand dismissively, a gesture one might use to shoo away a fly. Emily turned on her heel. "Just get through the hour," she told herself. "Think about Leo." Leo was her 6-year-old son, currently at daycare, waiting for her to pick him up. She needed this job. She needed the tips. She returned with the chilled bottles of Pellegrino and 3 crystal glasses. As she reached over to pour Richard's water, a busboy squeezed past her in the narrow aisle, bumping her elbow. A scant teaspoon of water splashed onto the pristine white tablecloth about 3 inches from Richard's sleeve. It didn't touch him. It didn't even touch his silverware. Richard slammed his hand onto the table. The sound cracked through the restaurant like a gunshot. "Are you incompetent?" he roared. The entire restaurant went silent. Forks hovered halfway to mouths. "I'm so sorry, sir. Someone bumped me. Let me get a fresh cloth," Emily started, reaching for the napkins. "I don't want a fresh cloth. I want a waitress who isn't a clumsy idiot." Richard stood up, towering over her. He was a large man, imposing, and he used his size to intimidate. "Do you know how much this suit costs? It costs more than you make in a year." "Sir, it didn't touch you," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly but finding a surprising steel core. "It's just on the table." "Don't you talk back to me," Richard shouted, his face reddening. He grabbed the glass of water she had just poured and threw the contents onto the floor near her feet, shattering the glass. "Clean it up, like the help you are." Emily looked at the shards of glass near her worn-out sneakers. She looked at the water soaking into the cheap carpet. Then she looked up at Richard Sterling. She saw the smirk on his associate's face. She saw Gary, the manager, cowering in the corner, refusing to make eye contact. She saw the fear in Jenny's eyes. Something inside Emily Jenkins snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet click of a lock opening. The exhaustion, the late rent, the fear of the future. It all crystallized into a cold, hard diamond of rage. She didn't kneel to clean the glass. She took one step forward, entering Richard's personal space. She wasn't tall, but in that moment she felt 10 feet high. "Shout at me again," she said. Her voice was low, devoid of the customer service sweetness she had perfected over a decade. It was a flat, dangerous monotone. Richard blinked, genuinely taken aback. "Excuse me." "Shout at me." "Again," Emily repeated, enunciating every word. "And I will end you." Richard let out an incredulous laugh, looking around at his associates. "Did you hear that? The waitress is threatening me. You're going to end me? How? By spilling soup on my shoes?" "No," Emily said, maintaining unblinking eye contact. "I'll end you by reminding everyone in this city about what happened in room 402 at the grand opening of the Skyline Tower 3 years ago." The blood drained from Richard Sterling's face so fast it looked like a magic trick. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The arrogant smirk vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated terror. "Yeah," Emily whispered, leaning in closer. "I remember faces, Richard. Do you remember mine?" For 10 seconds, the silence in the silver spoon was absolute. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Richard Sterling, the titan of Seattle real estate, looked as if he had seen a ghost. His eyes darted around the room, noticing for the first time that half the diners had their phones out. The red recording lights were blinking. Richard stammered. He adjusted his jacket, his hands shaking slightly. "This service is atrocious. We're leaving." "Good idea," Emily said, standing her ground. Richard practically ran out of the restaurant, his confused associates scrambling to catch up, leaving a table full of unordered food and a shattered glass on the floor. As the door swung shut behind them, the restaurant erupted into whispers. "Emily!" Gary came storming over, his face purple. He wasn't angry at the billionaire who had thrown glass. He was angry at the problem he could control. "What the hell was that?" Gary screamed, spit flying. "Do you know who that was? That was Richard Sterling. He hosts the annual Developers Gala here. That account is worth $50,000 a year to this restaurant." "He threw glass at me, Gary," Emily said, her adrenaline beginning to crash, leaving her shaking. "He was abusive." "I don't care if he set the table on fire," Gary yelled. "You apologize. You beg. You don't threaten a billionaire." He ripped the ordering pad out of her hand. "You're done. Get out. You're fired." "You can't be serious," Emily said, looking around. "He assaulted me." "Pack your things and get out before I call the police for harassment." Gary pointed a shaking finger at the door. Emily looked around the room. A few customers looked sympathetic, but most looked away, not wanting to get involved. She untied her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the table next to the shattered glass. "Fine," she said. "I didn't want to work for a coward anyway." She walked out the back door, into the alleyway that smelled of rotting vegetables and stale grease. As soon as the heavy metal door clicked shut, the dam broke. Emily leaned against the brick wall and slid down until she was crouching on the pavement, burying her face in her hands. She was fired. She had no rent money, and she had just threatened one of the most powerful men in the state. But she wasn't crying because of the job. She was crying because she knew she had just started a war she wasn't sure she could win. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Then it buzzed again, and again. A continuous vibration. She pulled it out. It was Jenny, the hostess. "Jenny, Emily, OMG. Look at Twitter, now." Emily opened the app with trembling fingers. The video was already trending locally. The hashtag #Waitress vs Billionaire was rising. The video showed the confrontation clearly. Richard's shouting, the glass shattering, and Emily's icy threat. But the comments weren't all supportive. User 1. "Who does she think she is? He's a job creator. She's just a server." User 2. "That waitress is psycho. I'll end you. Sounds like a death threat. Lock her up." User 3. "Wait, what happened in room 402? Room 402. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. She hadn't meant to say it. It had slipped out in the heat of the moment, a memory she had buried deep down from her time working catering at the Skyline Hotel years ago. She had been invisible then, just a girl with a tray of champagne, blending into the wallpaper. But she had seen things. She stood up, wiping her eyes. She needed to get Leo. She needed to go home and lock the door. But as she walked toward her car, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the curb, blocking her path. The window rolled down. It was one of the grey-suited associates from the restaurant. He held out a manila envelope. "Mr. Sterling would like to offer you a severance package," the man said, his voice slick. $10,000, cash. In exchange, you sign a non-disclosure agreement stating that today never happened and that you were high on drugs during the altercation. Emily looked at the envelope. $10,000. That was rent for months. That was a new transmission for her car. That was Christmas presents for Leo. She looked at the man's smug face. They thought they could buy her silence. They thought she was just a poor waitress who would jump at the crumbs falling from their table. She thought about the fear in Richard's eyes when she mentioned room 402. Emily smiled, and it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Tell Mr. Sterling," she said, leaning into the window, "that the price just went up. And I don't want his money. I want the truth." She walked past the SUV, got into her Honda, and locked the doors. As she drove away, she watched in the rearview mirror as the SUV made a sharp U-turn and began to follow her. The drive to the Little Stars daycare center was a blur of paranoia. Every time Emily checked her rearview mirror, the black SUV was there. It stayed 2 cars back, non-aggressive but persistent, like a shark fin cutting through water. Emily gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. They know about Leo, she realized with a jolt of nausea. Of course they know. Men like Richard Sterling don't offer $10,000 without doing a background check first. She pulled into the daycare parking lot, jumping out of the car before the engine had fully shuddered to a halt. She ran inside, bypassing the sign-in sheet. "Emily?" Mrs. Higgins, the daycare director, looked up from her desk, startled. "You're early. Is everything okay? I need Leo." "Now," Emily said, her voice breathless. "Family emergency." Minutes later, Leo came bounding out of the playroom, holding a drawing of a blue dinosaur. "Mommy, look, it's a T-Rex!" Emily scooped him up, hugging him so tight he squirmed. "It's beautiful, baby. We have to go on a little adventure, okay? Can we get ice cream? Maybe later." She buckled him into the car seat with trembling hands. As she pulled out of the lot, she saw the black SUV idling across the street. The driver didn't even try to hide. She couldn't go home. Her apartment in Fremont was ground floor, the locks were flimsy, and Mr. Kowalski would give the key to anyone who flashed a $50 bill. It wasn't safe. Emily drove aimlessly for an hour, weaving through the erratic Seattle traffic, taking sudden turns to see if the SUV would follow. It did for a while, until she pulled a dangerous maneuver, cutting across 3 lanes of traffic on I-5 to take an exit at the very last second. Tires screeched behind her, horns blared. But when she looked back, the black SUV was forced to continue straight on the highway. She had lost them. For now. She drove to a cheap motel in SeaTac, near the airport. It was the kind of place where you paid cash, and the clerk didn't ask for ID. Once inside the room, which smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon polish, she locked the door, chained it, and pushed a heavy armchair against it. Leo sat on the bed, watching cartoons on the fuzzy TV. Emily went into the bathroom and turned on the shower to create white noise. She sat on the edge of the tub and finally let her mind go back to that night. 3 years ago, the Skyline Tower grand opening. Emily hadn't been a waitress then. She was working for a high-end catering company. She had been assigned to the VIP suites on the 4th floor, an area restricted from the general press. She had been carrying a tray of champagne flutes down the hallway when she heard the shouting coming from room 402. It was a meeting room, not a guest suite. The door was slightly ajar. Curiosity, or perhaps fate, had made her pause. Inside, she saw Richard Sterling. He looked younger then, less grey, but just as angry. He was arguing with a man Emily recognized from the news, Arthur Penson, the city's chief safety inspector. "You can't open the residential floors, Richard," Penson was pleading. He was sweating, clutching a roll of blueprints. The concrete mixture in the south support pillars? The tests came back degraded. If there's a tremor, even a minor earthquake, floors 10 through 20 could shear off. "Do you know how much money I lose for every day we delay?" Richard's voice was cold steel. "The units are sold. The tenants move in next week." "It's unsafe. It's criminal negligence." "It's only negligence if something happens," Richard had sneered. He walked over to a briefcase on the table and flipped it open. It was stacked with cash. "And nothing is going to happen, Arthur, because you're going to sign the permit. And then you're going to take this bonus and take your wife on that cruise she's always wanted." I can't," Penson stammered. "Then I'll ruin you," Richard said. "I'll bury you in lawsuits. I'll find that illegitimate daughter you're hiding in Oregon, and I'll put her on the front page of the Times. Sign the paper, Arthur." Emily had watched, frozen in horror, as the chief inspector, a man sworn to protect the city, slowly reached for the pen. He signed the safety permit for a building that was structurally unsound, a building that now housed 300 families. As Emily had backed away, her tray clipped the doorframe. Clink! Richard had spun around. His eyes locked onto hers. She ran. She dropped the tray and ran down the fire escape, quitting her job the next day via text. She never told anyone. She was a single mum. Who would believe her over a billionaire? And shortly after, Arthur Penson had died of a sudden heart attack. The secret died with him, or so Richard thought. Back in the motel bathroom, Emily splashed cold water on her face. The building is still standing, she thought. But Seattle is on a fault line. It's a ticking time bomb. Her phone buzzed again. It wasn't Gary, and it wasn't the hostess. It was a DM on Twitter. Rachel investigates. I saw the video. I'm an investigative journalist for the Seattle Chronicle. Most people think you're crazy, but I saw the look on Sterling's face. He's terrified. What is room 402? Talk to me. I can protect you. Emily stared at the screen. Rachel Ortiz. She was known as a bulldog reporter, the kind who got sued by corporations and won. Emily typed back, I can't talk over the phone. They are following me. A reply came instantly. Meet me at the Central Library, 4th floor, back stacks, tomorrow at 10 a.m. It's public, lots of cameras. Be careful. While Emily was hiding in a motel room, Richard Sterling was pacing the length of his penthouse office, overlooking the city he treated as his personal chessboard. The view was magnificent, rain-slicked skyscrapers reflecting the neon lights below. But Richard wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at Conrad, his head of security and personal fixer. Conrad was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. He didn't wear a suit. He wore a black tactical turtleneck and a leather jacket. He didn't speak unless necessary. We lost her, Conrad said. His voice was gravel. Richard threw a crystal tumbler of scotch against the wall. It shattered, leaving a wet stain on the expensive silk wallpaper. You lost a waitress driving a Honda Civic? Richard screamed. I pay you $500,000 a year, and you get outmaneuvered by a woman who serves salads for a living? She drove aggressively. We couldn't follow without causing a pile-up, Conrad replied calmly. She's spooked. Of course she's spooked. I threatened her. Richard ran a hand through his hair. She knows, Conrad. She knows about Penson. She knows about the concrete. Conrad's eyes narrowed. If she goes to the press with a story about concrete, it's hearsay. Penson is dead. The paperwork is clean. It's her word against yours. It's not just her word, Richard snapped. She was there. If she describes the meeting, if she mentions the bribe, the investors will panic. The stock will tank. They'll order an independent structural audit. If they drill into those pillars, Conrad, it's over. The company creates a crater, and I go to prison for manslaughter if that building ever falls. Richard walked to his desk and slammed his fist down. I want her discredited. I want her life dismantled. By the time she tries to speak, I want her to look like a drug-addicted, lying lunatic that no one would trust with a weather report. Conrad nodded once. Consider it done. We'll start with the finances. The next morning, Emily woke up to a nightmare that had nothing to do with monsters. She tried to buy coffee at the motel vending machine. Her debit card was declined. Insufficient funds. She frowned. She knew she had $300. It wasn't much, but it was there. She opened her banking app. Balance, $4,500. Her eyes widened. There was a hold on her account, a legal garnish. She frantically called the bank. After 20 minutes on hold, a customer service representative told her, Ms. Jenkins, your account has been frozen due to a pending lawsuit filed this morning by the Silver Spoon Restaurant Group for damages and loss of reputation. They are suing you for $50,000. Gary, Emily whispered. Richard must have gotten to him. Or Richard simply bought the restaurant overnight just to sue her. It got worse. When she walked out to the motel parking lot, her car was gone. In its place was a tow truck receipt stuck to the asphalt with a piece of tape. Repossessed. Failure to update payments. "No," Emily gasped. I paid it. I paid it last week." But she realized with a sinking heart that she had been late. Just a few days. Usually, the bank gave a grace period. But if someone powerful made a phone call, grace periods disappeared. She was stranded in SeaTac with a 6-year-old, no car, no money, and a lawsuit hanging over her head. Leo tugged on her jeans. "Mummy, where's the car? I'm hungry." Emily looked down at her son. She felt tears pricking her eyes, hot and stinging. They were stripping her bare. They were showing her that she was nothing. But as she looked at Leo, the despair turned into something else. It turned into the same cold rage she had felt in the restaurant. They took her money. They took her car. They were trying to take her dignity. They made a mistake, she thought. If I had anything to lose, I might have been scared. But now, I have nothing left to lose. "Come on, Leo," she said, grabbing his hand. "We're taking the bus." "Where are we going?" "We're going to the library." The Seattle Central Library was an architectural marvel of glass and steel. Emily, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, navigated the escalators with Leo in tow. She kept her head down. On the 4th floor, hidden between the rows of non-fiction history books, a woman was waiting. She had short, curly dark hair and sharp glasses. She was tapping furiously on a laptop. Emily approached. "Rachel?" The woman looked up. Her eyes scanned Emily, then Leo. She softened immediately. "Emily, you made it. I heard about the car." "How?" Emily asked, sliding into the chair opposite her. "I have a police scanner, and I have sources at the repo depot. Sterling moves fast." Rachel closed her laptop. "He's trying to break you. It's a standard intimidation tactic. Isolate the target, remove resources, induce panic." "It's working," Emily admitted. "I have $4 in change in my pocket. Here." Rachel slid a thick envelope across the table. $500. Petty cash from the paper. It's an advance on your story. Emily looked at the envelope, then at Rachel. "Why help me?" "Because Richard Sterling is a bully who thinks he owns this city, and I hate bullies." Rachel clicked a pen. "Now, tell me everything. Start with room 402. Emily took a deep breath. She told her about the catering job. She told her about Arthur Penson. She told her about the concrete and the bribe. As she spoke, Rachel's face went pale. She stopped typing. "Wait," Rachel whispered. "You're saying the Skyline Tower, the one where the mayor lives, is structurally compromised?" "Richard said if there's a tremor, floors 10 through 20 could shear off," Emily said. Rachel looked sick. "Emily, there's a minor fault line shift predicted for this region. Geologists have been talking about it all week. Small tremors. If you're right, I am right. We need proof," Rachel said. "We can't print this on a memory. He'll sue the paper into oblivion. Did you keep anything? A schedule? A catering log?" Emily shook her head. "I was scared. I ran." Rachel bit her lip. "Okay, then we need to find someone else who knows. Penson is dead. Sterling is the villain. Who else was in the room?" "Just them. And..." Emily paused, a memory surfacing. "There was a driver. Sterling's driver. He brought the briefcase of cash in. He stood by the door. Do you remember what he looked like?" "Older guy. Scar on his chin. Looked kind of sad." Rachel's eyes lit up. She typed furiously. "Sterling fired his longtime driver 6 months ago. Rumor was the guy developed a conscience or a drinking problem. His name is Frank Miller." Rachel spun the laptop around. Is this him? Emily looked at the photo. Yes, that's him. If he carried the cash, Rachel said, grabbing her bag. He knows where the bodies are buried. We need to find Frank Miller before Sterling realizes we're looking for him. Just then, a voice echoed over the library intercom. Attention, please. We have a lost child alert. We are locking the doors. Security is doing a sweep. Emily's blood ran cold. She looked at the chair next to her. It was empty. Leo, she whispered. She looked down the aisle. Leo! She scrambled up, panic seizing her throat. She had been so focused on the story, on the money. Leo! She screamed, running toward the main atrium. At the end of the hallway, near the elevators, she saw a man in a black tactical turtleneck holding Leo's hand. It was the man from the SUV, Conrad. Leo was holding a lollipop, looking up at the man trustingly. Conrad looked at Emily. He didn't smile. He just held up his phone, showing her a text message, and then pointed the screen at her. The text read, "Stop talking, or we take him." The elevator doors pinged open. Conrad stepped in, pulling Leo with him. "No!" Emily screamed, sprinting across the polished floor. She threw herself at the doors, but they slid shut inches from her face. She pounded on the metal, screaming her son's name as the elevator began to descend. The elevator numbers ticked down. 4, 3, 2. Emily was hyperventilating. She slammed her hands against the brushed metal doors, her vision blurring. "He took him! He took my son!" Security guards were running toward her, radios crackling. "Mom, you need to step back!" Rachel Ortiz was there in a second, grabbing Emily by the shoulders. She didn't hug her. She shook her hard. "Emily, listen to me," Rachel hissed, her face inches from Emily's. "If you get arrested right now, Richard wins. Conrad is gone. He's already in the garage. Screaming won't bring Leo back." "He has my boy," Emily choked out, her legs giving way. "He's just a baby." Rachel dragged Emily toward the emergency stairwell, flashing her press badge to confuse the guards just long enough for them to slip through the heavy fire door. Once in the concrete echo of the stairwell, Rachel pulled out her phone. "He won't hurt Leo," Rachel said, though her voice lacked its usual certainty. "This is leverage. Sterling isn't a murderer. He's a businessman. He's holding a collateral asset to force a trade. If he hurts the boy, he goes down for life, and he knows it. He wants silence." Emily's phone rang. It was a blocked number. She stared at it, her hands trembling so violently she almost dropped the device. She swiped answer and put it on speaker. "Mommy?" Leo's voice was small and tearful. "Leo! Leo, baby, are you okay?" Emily sobbed. "I'm playing a game on the man's iPad," Leo sniffled. "He says we're waiting for you. He bought me a Happy Meal. I'm coming, baby, I'm coming right now." The phone was snatched away on the other end. Richard Sterling's voice came through, smooth as silk and cold as ice. "He's fine, Miss Jenkins. For now. He's currently sitting in my private suite at the Skyline Tower. Safe and sound. If you touch him," Emily snarled, a sound so primal it made Rachel flinch. "Spare me the dramatics," Richard said. "You have something I want. Your silence. And you are currently with a reporter who is becoming a nuisance. Here is the deal. You leave the reporter. You come to the Skyline Tower alone. You sign the NDA, you record a video statement admitting you lied about everything, and you walk out with your son and $50,000. If you bring the police, or if Ms. Ortiz prints a single word, well, Child Protective Services will receive a very credible anonymous tip about the drugs we found in your apartment. You'll never see him again." "I'll be there," Emily said. 1 hour. Penthouse suite. The line went dead. Emily looked at Rachel. Her eyes were dry now. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold, terrifying focus. "I have to go," Emily said. "I have to sign the paper." "No," Rachel said, blocking the stairs. "Emily, think. If you go there empty-handed, he owns you. You sign the paper, he gives you Leo, and then a week later, he ruins you anyway to make sure you stay quiet. He'll plant evidence. He'll hound you until you break. The only way to save Leo permanently is to walk into that room holding a grenade." "I don't have a grenade. I have nothing." "We get the driver," Rachel said intensely. "We get Frank Miller. We get the proof. You walk in there and tell Richard, 'Give me my son, or I release the evidence that sends you to prison for 20 years. That is the only language men like him understand. Mutually assured destruction. Emily looked at her watch. "I have 50 minutes. Frank lives in Renton. We can make it in 20 if I drive like a maniac." Rachel held out her keys. "Do you trust me?" Emily hesitated. Every instinct screamed to just run to her son. But she remembered the smirk on the associate's face. She remembered the fear in Richard's eyes when she mentioned room 402. Rachel was right. Surrender was death. "Drive," Emily said. The ride to Renton was a blur of swerving lanes and running red lights. Rachel's beat-up Subaru handled the corners with surprising agility. They pulled up to a dilapidated trailer park 20 minutes later. Frank Miller's trailer was at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by overgrown weeds and rusting car parts. Emily didn't wait. She jumped out of the car and pounded on the aluminum door. "Frank! Frank Miller!" No answer. "Go away!" A muffled voice shouted from inside. "I don't want any Girl Scout cookies." "Frank, my name is Emily Jenkins," she shouted. "I was there 3 years ago. Room 402. The door creaked open. Frank Miller stood there in a stained undershirt, holding a half-empty beer. He looked older than his photo. His eyes were bloodshot and weary. The scar on his chin twitched. "You," he whispered. "The waitress." "He has my son," Emily said, stepping forward. She didn't beg. She stared him down. "Richard Sterling took my 6-year-old boy. He's holding him at the Skyline Tower right now." Frank's face fell. He looked down at his beer. I can't help you. I signed an NDA. They pay me a pension to keep my mouth shut. If I talk, they cut the money. I have medical bills." "He built that tower with bad concrete, Frank," Emily said, her voice cracking. "You know he did. You drove the cash to pay off Penson, and now he has my son inside that building." Frank turned away. "I can't. They're too powerful." Emily grabbed his arm. It was a risk, but she had to make him look at her. "Frank, look at me. You're not a bad man. I remember you holding the door for me that day. You looked sad. You looked like you hated what was happening." She squeezed his arm. "My son is 6. He likes dinosaurs, and he's afraid of the dark. Richard Sterling is a monster, and you helped make him. You can't change that. But you can decide right now if you're going to let him win again." Frank looked at Emily. He saw the desperation, the fire, the absolute terror of a mother. He let out a long, shuddering sigh. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a keyring. On it was a small, silver USB drive. "I didn't trust him," Frank mumbled. "So I started recording the rides. I have audio. Him and Penson. Him and the contractors. Him laughing about how much money he saved on the sand-heavy mixture." He pressed the keys into Emily's hand. "Burn him," Frank said. "Burn him to the ground." The Skyline Tower pierced the clouds, a jagged needle of glass overlooking the Puget Sound. It was the jewel of Seattle, the tallest residential building in the state. And it was built on a lie. Emily stood in the lobby. She had left Rachel in the car with a specific instruction. If I'm not out in 15 minutes, or if I text you the code word, you upload the files to the server and email every news outlet in the country. Emily wore her waitress uniform, jeans and a black t-shirt. She hadn't changed. She didn't care. "I'm here to see Mr. Sterling," she told the concierge. "He's expecting you. Penthouse elevator." The ride up took a lifetime. Her ears popped. She clutched the USB drive in her pocket so hard the metal dug into her palm. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse. It was a sprawling space of white marble and floor-to-ceiling windows. Richard Sterling was sitting on a leather sofa, sipping wine. Conrad stood by the window, arms crossed. And there, sitting on the rug, playing with a set of expensive architectural blocks, was Leo. "Mommy!" Leo jumped up and ran to her. Emily dropped to her knees and caught him, burying her face in his neck, smelling his hair, checking for injuries. He was fine, terrified, but fine. "I told you," Richard said, standing up. "I'm a man of my word. The boy is unharmed." Emily stood up, pushing Leo behind her. "Let us go." First, the formalities. Richard gestured to a table where a stack of documents lay. "Sign these. Admission of guilt, NDA, and a restraining order preventing you from coming within 500 feet of me or my properties." Emily walked to the table. She looked at the papers. Then she looked at Richard. "No." Richard laughed, a dry, barking sound. "Excuse me? You are in no position to negotiate." "Conrad?" The large man stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "If you touch us," Emily said, her voice steady. "My friend Rachel uploads the audio files." Richard froze. "What audio files?" Emily pulled the USB drive from her pocket. She held it up like a holy relic. "Frank Miller says hello," she said. "I have you on tape, Richard. Bribing Penson. Admitting the concrete is degraded. Laughing about the safety of the families living below us right now." Richard's face went the color of ash. He looked at Conrad, then back at Emily. "Give that to me." "It's a copy," Emily lied. "The original is with the Times. If I don't walk out of here in 5 minutes, the story goes live. Your stock drops to 0. The FBI raids your office, and you go to prison." You bitch," Richard whispered. The veneer of the sophisticated billionaire cracked, revealing the thug underneath. "I will destroy you." "You're already destroyed," Emily shouted, stepping forward. "It's over, Richard." Suddenly, a low rumble vibrated through the floor. It started as a hum, rattling the wine glasses on the table. Then, it grew louder. The floor beneath their feet jerked violently to the left. Leo screamed. Emily grabbed him, falling to her knees. "What is that?" Conrad yelled, losing his balance. "The fault line," Emily gasped, remembering Rachel's warning. "The tremor." The building groaned, a terrifying, metallic screech of steel twisting beyond its limit. The skyline tower was designed to sway in an earthquake, to bend with the wind. But the skyline tower had bad bones. Crack, a sound like a cannon blast echoed through the penthouse. A spiderweb fracture appeared on the marble floor, running from the elevator to the window. "The supports!" Richard screamed, looking at the wall. The plaster was cracking, revealing the steel beams underneath. The building lurched again, this time tilting sickeningly. The sensation was like being on a ship in a storm. Furniture slid across the room. The massive floor-to-ceiling window shattered, wind howling into the room, sucking papers out into the void. "We have to get out!" Emily yelled, grabbing Leo. She ran toward the elevator, but the power cut. The lights died, replaced by red emergency strobes. The elevator panel was dead. "Stairs!" Conrad shouted, abandoning his boss and running for the emergency exit. Richard stood in the middle of his crumbling empire, frozen. He was looking at the cracks in the walls, muttering, It was supposed to hold. The calculation said it would hold. "Richard, move!" Emily screamed. She didn't know why she yelled it. He was the villain. He was the reason this was happening. But she couldn't watch a man die. The building gave another violent shudder. The floor beneath the sofa, where Richard was standing, gave way. It didn't collapse entirely, but it slanted sharply downward as the structural integrity of the 40th floor failed. Richard slid. He scrabbled at the polished floor, his fingernails scraping against the marble, sliding toward the shattered window and the open air beyond. "Help me!" he shrieked, his legs dangling over the edge of the abyss. Emily looked at the door to the stairs where safety lay. Then she looked at the man hanging off the edge of the world. She looked at Leo. "Stay by the wall, baby. Don't move." Emily Jenkins, the waitress who had been fired, sued and threatened, got down on her stomach and crawled across the tilting floor. She reached out a hand. "Grab it!" she screamed over the howling wind. Richard Sterling reached up, his eyes wide with the realization of his own mortality. He locked eyes with the woman he had called a poor waitress. Their fingers brushed. The wind howled through the shattered window, a deafening roar that swallowed Richard Sterling's scream. He was dangling 400 feet above the streets of Seattle, his legs kicking uselessly at the smooth glass exterior of the tower. Emily's hand was locked around his wrist. Her stomach was pressed flat against the tilting marble floor, and her sneakers were hooked precariously around the leg of a heavy oak table that was bolted to the floor. "Let go!" Richard screamed, his face a mask of pure terror. "You're going to fall." "Shut up!" Emily gritted her teeth, tears of exertion streaming down her face. Her shoulder burned as if it were on fire. Richard was a heavy man, dead weight dragging her toward the abyss. I'm not you, Richard. I don't let people die." The building groaned again, a deep, mournful sound of steel twisting. The floor tilted another degree. Emily slid 3 inches towards the edge. "Mummy!" Leo screamed from the hallway door, his eyes wide with terror. "Stay back, Leo!" Emily yelled, her voice cracking. She looked down at Richard, the man who had humiliated her, the man who had threatened her child, the man who had built a tomb and called it a palace. It would be so easy to let go. Her fingers were slipping. Sweat made his skin slick. If she let go, the problem of Richard Sterling disappeared forever. But then she saw it. Beneath the arrogance, beneath the billion-dollar suit and the cruel sneer, Richard was just a terrified old man who didn't want to die alone. "Grab my other hand!" Emily screamed. Richard looked up, stunned. He saw the determination in her eyes, the same fire that had made her stand up to him in the restaurant. He reached up with his free hand, desperate, clawing at her forearm. With a primal scream that tore at her throat, Emily pulled. She leveraged every ounce of strength she had, digging her nails into the floor, using the adrenaline of a mother protecting her world. Inch by inch, Richard Sterling slid back over the precipice. His chest hit the ledge, then his waist. He scrambled, kicking, clawing, until he rolled onto the cracked marble floor of the penthouse, gasping for air like a landed fish. Emily collapsed next to him, her arm numb, her chest heaving. For a moment, there was only the sound of the wind and their ragged breathing. Then, the door to the stairwell burst open. It wasn't Conrad. It was a team of firefighters, their yellow coats bright against the dust and debris. "We have civilians!" one of them shouted. "Grab the kid! Move! The structure is critical!" A firefighter scooped Leo up. 2 others grabbed Emily and Richard, hauling them to their feet. "We have to move now!" the captain roared. "The dampers are failing on floors 20 through 30. The descent was a blur of nightmare. The emergency lights flickered red. The staircase vibrated constantly, throwing them against the concrete walls. Every few floors, a loud boom echoed through the shaft as another support beam gave way. Richard didn't speak. He stumbled down the stairs, looking at his feet, stripped of his dignity, stripped of his power. He was just a survivor. They burst out of the emergency exit at street level just as a massive chunk of the facade, tons of glass and steel, peeled off the side of the building and crashed into the street behind them, crushing a row of parked cars. The dust cloud engulfed them. Emily coughed, shielding Leo with her body. When the dust settled, the scene was chaotic. Police cars, ambulances, news vans. The flashing lights were blinding. Paramedics rushed over, checking Leo, wrapping blankets around Emily. "Miss Jenkins!" Rachel Ortiz broke through the police line, ducking under the yellow tape. She ran to Emily, hugging her fiercely. "You're alive! I saw the debris fall. I thought—" "We're okay," Emily rasped, holding Leo tight. "We made it." Then the atmosphere shifted. Richard Sterling was sitting on the bumper of an ambulance, a paramedic tending to a cut on his head. He looked up and saw Emily. He stood up, pushing the paramedic away. He walked toward her. The crowd quieted. The cameras turned. Richard looked at Emily. He opened his mouth, perhaps to thank her, perhaps to offer her money again. But before he could speak, a heavy hand landed on his shoulder. "Richard Sterling?" It was the chief of police. Behind him stood 2 FBI agents. "We received a priority tip involving federal racketeering, bribery of a public official, and criminal negligence resulting in endangerment," the chief said, his voice carrying over the crowd. "And we have the audio files." Richard paled. He looked at Emily. Emily reached into her pocket. She pulled out the USB drive. It was still there. She hadn't needed to give it to Rachel. Rachel had already uploaded the backup copies the moment the 15-minute deadline passed. "I told you," Emily whispered, her voice hoarse but steady. "I warned you." Richard slumped. The arrogance finally left him, leaving a hollow shell. He didn't fight as the officers twisted his arms behind his back and clicked the handcuffs into place. As they walked him toward the squad car, Richard stopped. He turned back one last time. "Why?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Why did you pull me up?" Emily adjusted the blanket around her son. She looked the billionaire in the eye. "Because my son was watching," she said, "and I wanted him to see what a real human being looks like." Richard lowered his head. The police shoved him into the car, and he disappeared behind the tinted glass, this time not as a VIP, but as a prisoner. 6 months later, the Skyline Tower didn't fall, but it was condemned. It stood empty against the Seattle skyline, a hollow monument to greed, currently being dismantled floor by floor. The scandal was the biggest in the state's history. The Sterling Hale stock had plummeted to 0. Richard Sterling was awaiting trial without bail, facing 20 years in federal prison. But on a sunny Tuesday in the Fremont neighborhood, there was a line out the door of a newly renovated building. The sign above the door was hand-painted in bright blue and gold. The Lion and Lamb. Inside, the smell of fresh sourdough and roasted coffee filled the air. Emily Jenkins tied her apron, a clean, crisp white one. She wasn't an employee. She was the owner. The settlement from the lawsuit, defamation, emotional distress, and unlawful termination had been substantial. Rachel Ortiz's series of articles, titled "The Waitress and the Wolf," had won a Pulitzer Prize and turned Emily into a local hero. "Order up for table 4, a voice called out. It was Frank Miller. He looked healthier now, the circles gone from under his eyes. He was working the counter, charming the customers. He had turned state's witness against Richard, earning immunity and a fresh start. Emily walked over to the corner booth. A young couple was sitting there. The man was snapping his fingers at Frank. "Hey, We've been waiting 5 minutes for water, the man snapped. Emily placed a hand on the table. She smiled. It was a warm smile, but there was steel behind it. Sir, she said gently, in this house, we treat everyone with respect. The water is coming. But if you snap your fingers at my staff again, you can eat somewhere else. The man looked at Emily. He saw the scar on her shoulder, visible just above her shirt line. He saw the way she stood, unshakable. Sorry, the man mumbled, looking down. Sorry. Thank you, Emily said. She walked back to the kitchen where Leo was sitting at a small desk, doing his homework. He looked up and grinned. Mum, can I have a cookie? Only if you finished your math. I did. Emily handed him a chocolate chip cookie. She looked out at her restaurant, filled with laughter and light. She had lost her job, her car, and almost her life. But she had found her voice. She was no longer the poor waitress. She was the woman who had brought down a giant, and she knew, with absolute certainty, that no one would ever make her feel small again. And that is the incredible, true-to-life story of how Emily Jenkins took down an empire. It's a powerful reminder that dignity has no price tag, and that even the most powerful people in the world can crumble if they build their foundation on lies. Emily didn't just save herself. She saved her son. She saved the truth. And in a twisted way, she even saved the man who tried to destroy her, just to show him that kindness is stronger than greed. What would you have done if you were hanging off that ledge? Would you have pulled Richard up or let him fall? Let me know in the comments below. I seriously want to read your debates on this one. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss another story of justice served. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.